Welcome to the Legacy Leaders Podcast. Are you doing the best for your client to help them create their legacy? Are you creating a plan that goes far beyond finances to help people ensure that it becomes the driving force behind all decisions? On this podcast, hosts Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller will help you with growing your practice and your clients' peace of mind. Together, they bring the best and brightest minds to share with you how to help your clients develop their best legacy. And now, here are your hosts, Katie Beth and Stan.
Welcome back to the Legacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Stan Miller and Katie Beth Hand. Our guest today is industry leader, real estate entrepreneur, and Club Capital founder, Darin Davis. Darin, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you. I'm really looking forward to today.
Absolutely. So you have over 25 years of experience in real estate, and you've done over $1 billion in debt and equity as a sponsor. Tell our listeners a little bit about your background and what has gotten you to this point in your career.
I'd love to. And I tell you, there's no secret sauce or anything crazy. I literally, in the late 90s, I was working for a couple of software companies. And back then, if you guys can remember, anybody in their 50s plus, there was the .com just bubble was going on. Everybody was making money. Everybody was doing well. But what was happening is that I found myself between my three companies I worked for about 15 years, that I was literally working Monday to Friday. And I was working for other people. I was a high producer. Things were great. But then I had a life event. My father passed away a little early, unexpectedly. And I just stepped back and I said, what am I doing? Where am I going? I didn't really have a plan, a career plan, what's next. And I knew that I had to do something different. And I literally am driving from San Francisco to San Jose to go to work. And on the radio, I'm hearing AM radio. For us old guys, listen to AM radio. So I'm listening to a financial show. And this guy's caught my attention. And I'm going, I've never heard anybody talk like this before. And I'm listening. And I pull into the parking lot. And there's still about 10 minutes left on the program. And I said, I got to sit in my car and listen to this, because there was no books on tape. There was no internet. There was nothing out there. And sure enough, it was Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad. Had never heard of him, didn't know anything about him. He couldn't sell the book. He was promoting it. Nobody wanted it. He was really having trouble in the late 90s getting rid of it. And literally that weekend, I ran to a bookstore, and I had to go to several of them, but I found a copy out in California. I picked it up and I said, I don't know what I want to do, but I'm going to do something different. And I don't know what it is, but this is really that pivot point where I said, it's time for me to start thinking about how I can build my own business and my own legacy and be in control and not have others control me. So that happened in really 2001, 2002. And best decision I ever made. I don't look back at all. It's not easy being an entrepreneur and doing everything when you're responsible for everything for the most part, but best decision I ever made.
For those interested in becoming an entrepreneur, but maybe they're not sure where to start, what is your best advice for launching? What is your best advice for starting out?
Gosh, I get this question a ton, and I've got tons of metaphors that I've used for it. And I'm trying to figure out what is the best one. And you guys are gonna crack up, but I started singing the Hokey Pokey one time. Put your left foot in, put your left foot out, put your left foot in. So I was going like, put both, you gotta go. You've got to take that first step. And is it uncomfortable? Absolutely. But if you think about things like, let's just think about atrophy. Everybody knows when you get a broken arm and you have a cast on it, and it just sits there for 6 to 8 weeks before you get the cast off, your arm gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And then nothing happens. So if you're not doing anything to take that next step, you're just wasting away the opportunities. Or if you're going to waste it, or you're going to spend it, or you're going to invest it, you've got to be doing something. And I'll tell you this, it's a little scary. You're not always going to be right, but you're always going to learn. And the best thing I ever did was put myself in a position to have a business support me and my family in the event we weren't able to be at the business full time. And that right there is probably the biggest thing that I've gotten out of what I've done. And for the sheer fact that I said, I'm starting and I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to get it done and figure it out. That's what I did. So there's no secret sauce. It's just, you've got to take that first step.
That's great
So,
advice.
so I have a question about what maybe even a bigger step for entrepreneurs. And I'm speaking personally about this, but also about the dozens or hundreds of clients I've worked with over the years. Certainly, the decision to get into business is a big leap. We know all about the risk, and there's no safety net, there's no parachute, all those metaphors, true. The other big leap, though, is how do you let go and how do you let go of the business so that the business doesn't need you? That's the key to building its value, right? But how do you do that?
Yeah. Yeah. I tell you, if you think you're going to do it on your own, you're crazy. Okay. There's just no way. You've got to hire people that are absolutely of like mind, or like mind meaning entrepreneurial, that want that next step, that are willing to move on. And you've got to build a team. I tried, gosh, I want to say maybe the first 7 or 8 years doing it on my own. Was I successful? Yeah, I was successful. Was I just going to put myself out of business physically and emotionally and mentally? Yes, I was. Yeah. And I just ended up, I got one good employee, then I got another one. And the thing that I loved about the people we brought on board is that they wanted to eventually do what I was doing. And I embraced that. I said, come on, you know what? If you can pick this up 2, 3, 5 years, and you can go do your own thing, and you can do some of the things that we practice and we preach and we implement, that's everything to me. Now I have actually shared that wisdom, that knowledge, and somebody's executing on it. So I never I look for people to work with or like-minded, like entrepreneurial and want to grow, but I'm never like looking for just an employee. And sometimes people are employees, and that's great, but it's building that team. You got to have a team.
So how did you learn to let go and let them run it? Did you take a
Uh,
long vacation? Was that the secret?
No, I don't want to get too, well, I will, because this is pretty important. And we'll talk about this a little bit later probably, but we had a life event. My wife got sick with cancer. Okay. And if we had spent 10 years building up a kind of a real estate investment arm where we were building cash flow. So our whole plan was to be able to spend more time with our kids or retire early and still keep that cash flow going on. Well, when she got sick, everything just flipped. It like literally flipped overnight. And so I had to let go. I had to let go of the business day to day and focus on her and my 2 young children. And that went on for 5 years like that. But the business kept going because we had built the foundation. So what pulled me apart was what was important. And what was important was my wife and my children. So granted, that's a big event. That's just not something. And I don't know, just being the A type of personality that I am, that I would have just completely let go as quick as I did. But I did. And guess what? Everything ran. It ran. We put the right people, the right procedures, the right policies in place. And I looked back and I said, thank God that we did what we did in the beginning, because it works and it's still working 10 years later.
That would not be the preferred avenue anyone would choose.
But my point being, my point being is that if you build it correctly, and you get the right people and the right policies and procedures, I had to flip overnight. Okay. And I didn't think about it, but I didn't realize that I was doing such a good job at the business side itself. And so I don't know that I have the best answer for you other than it's preparation and building and team, because I literally had to switch overnight and nothing imploded.
So let me move on from that. I'm noticing your bio here, you talk about Club Capital. What's the vision? What's the mission there?
The vision comes back to 20 something years ago when I literally started thinking that I am being an employee and working for somebody else and putting in the amount of 40, 50, 60 hours I was doing. I said, if I did that for myself, could I actually prove to others and show others that there's ways to build wealth outside of the stock market? That was about all we had access to, a 401k. It was it. And my mother being a teacher and principal administration, and my father being a Marine, I had this kind of like really gritty get it done dad, and I had this education mom. And I was going like, if I could just share, and if I could teach, and if I could show, especially teenagers and young adults who I think have almost zero common skills in money from the ages of 16 to 23 or 24, it's just not taught like the real world is. That's club capital for me personally. But giving our investors an opportunity to invest in something different than what they've been exposed to as employees or professionals. We have a lot of sole proprietors like doctors and lawyers. They put in countless hours, make good money, but they don't always have the right avenue to do investing, especially when it comes to tax planning as well. And so we've given them that vehicle to do that. And we're local. They're not sending their money far away. We do most everything in the Texas market and primarily in the Austin and DFW markets. But it's been a passion of mine, and I wouldn't trade it. I love teaching, and I love doing the right thing for our investors, and we all make money, and we all get to smile.
Interesting, really interesting. I know Katie Beth I'm sure she wants to transition as I do to find out about the philanthropic side of you and your life. And I know that's a big part of who you are and what you do. And before we run out of time, I'd like to I think we both would like to get the story about your Never Quit initiative. I was
Yeah.
very intrigued by that.
Well, thank you. And this is something that I give a lot of credit to my wife and kids. When my wife was diagnosed, she took she literally took the approach that I will live no matter what. I'm going to raise my kids no matter what. And she smiled 24/7 about it. Okay. That's just who she was. My kids truly did not know until the last probably 4 weeks before she passed, because she never showed any pain. She never showed any regret, anything. And that's where the never quit came out of this. She never quit. And it's something that I saw firsthand. I saw families going bankrupt because this process we had to go through. I saw families lose their homes. I saw families fall apart. And I sat back and I was going, I can't believe how fortunate we are that we unknowingly prepared for a life crisis when we were actually preparing for a future freedom. But it just so happens that we were prepared, period. We were just prepared. And as I stepped back and I looked at everybody that helped us and what happened to these other families that I saw firsthand, and the medical system that was out there, and I just said, you know what? I'm not going to waste this opportunity to do something. Okay. And my life growing up, my parents weren't very philanthropic. We didn't do a lot of charity work and we didn't do a lot of volunteering. It just wasn't part of it. But what we had gone through with my kids and my wife, I saw firsthand what was going on. And I said, I want my kids to understand how good we have it. I want to be able to help these other families that were not as fortunate as us. And so it's a big piece of us.
So how are you doing that?
Okay, so there's two things we're doing. We are focused on really two things. Because I am in the multifamily housing arena, I have access to be involved in affordable housing. So we are working towards providing housing in the form of rent subsidies or something like that to pay housing bills, because I do not want a family to be displaced from a home when that's the nucleus and the core of that family being together when someone's going through cancer treatment or through a life event. So that's one. Number two is that we're starting to work on a program that is geared right to the 16, 17, 18-year-old guy, kid, a young adult, where it's basic applications of financial literacy in the real world, not just stocks, not options, not crypto, everything from just little things like compound interest. What's the power of that? What is debt? What is leverage? Understanding what a credit score can do for you or against you. And so we're working on these modules, and it's going to be all online. And there'll be it's a 12 module course that students will go through, and we're going to be providing that. And then the third thing that we're going to be doing is on the scholarship side. We are going to be, I'm a Shark Tank fan. So if somebody's got a business idea that's going to generate money, that's going to do that. So we're working to providing some, not big scholarships, $1,000 scholarships to a handful of students. And right here, we're doing it in our own local community.
Interesting. That is amazing. Also, I noticed one of the things you talk about is the impact of massive medical bills. And when a family has a medical event that's just beyond the normal, that it can be really crushing and devastating. And that's something that as I understand it, you're making an effort to address that also.
Yeah, and you guys know this is the world y'all live in. The number one reason, either one or two, that families go bankrupt is medical expenses. And you're going to do everything you can to keep your loved one in good health, period. Everybody's going to do it. It would be rare. And I am such a proponent, especially the older I get, being proactive on my health and understanding things that you can do today that will lessen the severity of certain things that will happen later in your life, and how you can live a better life and live longer and all that. It has become a passion of mine, seeing it firsthand, going through that process personally, and also seeing other families. And I hate to say this, but the people that really focus on their health on a day-to-day basis are the people that most often have the least amount of negative impact to their lives as they get older. So it's a huge thing of what we're doing. Anywhere I can incorporate good health practices with people, and I'm sharing that. In fact, I'm invested in a company that does medical grade supplements. And a lot of it is, and it's an investment. Plus, I'm a user. But long story short, but I've really gotten to a point in my life where your health can dictate so many things around your business, your family. It controls you, and that's become a big focus for me personally. And I evangelize it to anybody that asks me the question like you said. If you're going to ask me, I'm going to talk about it. So.
Yep.
No, I think that's great, Darin. And we've actually talked about that a little bit on the podcast before, how your health, people don't really equate that, I think, typically with your typical industry and how that impacts it. But we've talked on the podcast a little bit before about how when we are taking care of ourselves and taking the right supplements and eating the right foods and getting our exercise and drinking water, we're better bosses, we're better employees, we're better spouses, we're better parents. It just really changes the way when I'm taking care of myself and I'm eating right and doing all the right things, I have more energy and more mental capacity to do the things that I'm really needing to do. So I love that's come up in this. It's not the first time we've touched on that. So I hope our listeners are really picking up on that. And post podcast, I want to talk more about supplements. I'm gonna nail you down on that one. So, for all of our listeners that might be young entrepreneurs or people who are wanting to become entrepreneurs but don't really understand the importance of passive income, what would be, if you could give our listeners one piece of advice? And I know this is a tough question, but if you could give them one piece of advice, what would that be?
You've got to start, and I mean start small. And you're gonna fail. And if you're afraid of failure, you need to just step out of this and go do something else, because if you are going to fail. And I can tell you right now, I probably failed 50% of the time in the first 5 years. Okay. I didn't have a podcast. I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have anything. Now, if you've got that, your failure rate's probably going to go a lot lower. All right. But you have to take that first step and keep it simple. I see so many young guys that they're chasing returns, okay, and not chasing the relationship. Build the relationship. Don't chase the returns, because there's always going to be, this pie in the sky, 50% return, 10,000x unicorn. They're out there, and if they materialize, it's 1 in a million. But the guys that keep it super simple and take the first couple of steps, those are the guys that, I take 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 forward, one back, two forward, and it will happen. And I know, Stan, you and I are about the same age. You're very familiar with the Beatles, aren't you?
Right.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Here's a little fact about the Beatles. 21 number one songs, and guess how many chords they had in each one of those songs?
I'm thinking not many.
3. Okay. 3 chords. And they're the Beatles. They kept it simple. Yeah. And they kept trying and they kept trying and they found that 3 chords. And then look at that, 21 number one hits later.
That's a great
keep it simple.
That's a great advice to sum it up. Keep it simple and get started now. Well, thank you all so much for listening. This has been the Legacy Leaders Podcast with your hosts, Stan Miller and Katie Beth Hand. And our guest today was Darin Davis. To learn more about what we discussed on the show and to get connected with Darin, you can visit clubcapital.co. Darin, thank you so much again for joining us.
You know who Karl Rove is?
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
That's awesome. Clubcapital.co/legacy. And we will also link that for you in the show notes as well.
All right.
Super. All right. Thanks, Darin.
You've been listening to the Legacy Leaders Podcast with Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller. For more information on them and the show, please visit pinnaclelegacylaw.com. If you like what you've learned today, do share the program with your friends and subscribe wherever podcasts are found.